I understood that he was also to meet with the chair of the Justice in Action Committee. I don't know if or when that meeting actually occurred. And if it did occur, I don't know what the results of that meeting were. I did have a meeting with Manager Stansel, along with Town Attorney for Chapel Hill. And at that time, we attempted to discuss whether or not this board would be involved in the incident involving the Yates building. And if so, what that process would look like. We're a new board, as most of you know, and our role with regard to both the town and to the police department is really advisory in nature. We have no specifically defined responsibilities in terms of what investigations, if any, we conduct or take part in. We have only limited access to information. We, of course, don't have access to personnel or other information of that sort because we are essentially an advisory committee. So the interest of the town was in defining what role as a board that we would play with regard to the incident that occurred there, if any. And in doing that, we discussed what the parameters of our council charge would be. And at that time, during our conversation, we both agreed that, consistent with the town charge to the board, that our participation was relevant in several ways. One was to make recommendations to the town manager and the chief of police with regard to organizational matters and procedures, of which this arguably would fall within that category. Also to serve as a liaison to enhance community and police relations. So we do feel like that there is a place for this board within the process. The question is, what is it that we are to do, and that's still to be determined. The town is in the process of doing what it describes as a comprehensive review of the incident that occurred, the police action, and the response to that action. From that, they are going to deliver a report of their investigation to the town council. We discussed that if our board was to play a constructive role in this process, that we likewise needed to receive the report that was sent to the town council. And the manager agreed that that would be done, that the board would receive the report that was provided to the town council. In addition to that, the question of what we do with that report. So I want to give we have not received the report as of yet. From what I understand from Manager Stansel, that will probably be received within the next week or two. At least that's the pledge he's made to the members of the town council, and I assume we will receive it at the same time. I want to give all of our board members the opportunity to review that report. I'm sure that questions will arise from the members of the board as to what additional role we should play. We did agree that it would be that this board should have the opportunity to receive the report, ask questions about the report, and conduct such other further review as members of the board felt was appropriate within the context of our charge from the town council. I don't have a specific date as to when we can expect to receive the report. As I said, I expect to receive it within the next week or so, but I don't have a positive commitment on that. Beyond that, the role of, we've had several folks who have expressed an interest in making public comments today, and I have explained to them that it would not be appropriate for us to receive public comments about an issue about which we don't know that we have a role yet to be played. It may also well be that the report of the town council, without assuming or prejudging what that report will be, and I actually have no idea what their findings or conclusions will be. But I don't want to prejudge what those findings will be. But it may be that the possibility exists that that report will resolve whatever the issue is to the satisfaction of most people concerned. So I want to give this board the opportunity to receive that report to be able to examine that report and to then give context to other comments or concerns expressed by others that would be a supplement to that report that would help the board in defining whatever recommendations or charges that they make. Don?
So I'm going to speak here as both a council member and as someone who was part of the committee that discussed this board. And one of the things that we discussed was the fact that we wanted this board to act like many other boards that exist in our town, both as an educational piece, an advocacy piece, but also a place that built a certain amount of expertise that we as a council would depend on. And so there's ways in which I am wondering if it would not be more appropriate for this board to receive this report and to go ahead and ask any questions and fill out any information that would need to be filled out before the council received this report, because this is a citizen advisory board. What we're asking you to do is to look at both, not this particular incident, but in a broader scope, what our regulations and our procedures are, and to ask questions to get the information and make sure that when the report comes to the council and thus becomes public, that it is as complete as possible. Because what we don't want is to have a report where citizens haven't asked the questions that citizens are going to ask, that you're going to see things as a diverse set of citizens that the police officers aren't going to see just because they're like, oh, of course everybody knows this. Well, everybody doesn't know this because we don't all deal with this all the time. And so what I would like to recommend is that if you are willing, I know that you are a new board, that you would take on the responsibility of reading the report, receiving the report, reading it, asking for additional information and questions. And once you've gotten that additional information and felt like the report was complete, then that report would come to council. So I am not saying that you are responsible for judging one way or the other about the incidents of that report, but just making sure that you feel like a complete set of information is passed on to the council for them to read and assess. And I'll put that out to you as a committee.
I would, does any member of the board want to respond? Have any thoughts about that? Now, my first impression, Kevin, go ahead.
I think that would, in light of the role of this committee, I think that would be appropriate of us reviewing the document before it goes to council. I don't have a problem with that. I think that sounds logical. As Donna said, we are a diverse committee, as diverse as we could get at this time, but we are at least free thinking enough from all the conversations that we've heard in our previous meetings that we have strong opinions, and we would voice our concerns and questions that we have of the report.
Yes.
As a council member, can you talk about whether there's any sort of precedent for dealing with this kind of issue, where there's whether it's with the schools or anything, and then the committee, the report comes?
So the closest, the closest thing I'm thinking about is any sort of, there's the planning board, there's human services, there's any department where if we want to make suggestions about procedure, if something is going on, we will send it back to staff or send it to a committee to send us back recommendations. Because basically the idea of these committees is that there is very detailed micro level work that we're asking you to do and then send the information back to the council. So you're going to ask the question of very detailed procedure, and so that we're going to already have that information, so that when the report comes to us, we don't start at, well, how many officers are supposed to be on the ground during this sort of procedure, and that the questions that we might not see, those questions are already answered. Because what happens is that when the report comes to the council, it is a public report. When it comes to you, it's a public report too, and so people can send you questions. But when it comes to us, there's a sense that there's a certain amount of completeness to it. And I feel like if there's a process and when I say diverse, I mean diverse in that, like you said, there is a set of minds here that are very independent and can think for themselves and have different relationships with the town and can ask questions about that particular incident that would represent a lot of the voices that are in the town, so that when the report finally comes to council for them to review, that I feel like there will be a completeness to it. Not that I don't trust Chief Blue and his staff to try to make as complete a report as possible. That, you know, I know that as a citizen who worked on the planning board, that there's always questions, there's always details, things that you want to hammer out. And it's always good when a board will, even if those questions aren't answered, those questions can come with that report that the Citizens Committee has already made a statement, has already sort of processed it, and those questions can come to the council so that they can further consider them. So again, I am not suggesting that this committee necessarily make look at this report and have to make a statement about how this happened. I think one of the things that was in the charter is that there could be suggestions about changes in procedure or questions about procedure, but these are micro level things that we've asked you to become experts on, because we as a council are sort of have to manage the entire town, and for us to be experts on everything doesn't seem appropriate. And so this committee was created so that we could build some micro expertise. And sometimes that micro expertise is to say, we don't know the answers and we need to go out and find the answers. But sometimes that micro expertise is just the ability to ask questions that need to be asked so that we have complete information coming out to the community.
Chris?
So what's the timeline? When do we expect the report, and then when would the council want the report back?
Yeah, here, two points. To your point, Donna, when I met with the manager about this, his pledge to provide us with a report was really living into his pledge that he already made to the council to provide a report. So I wanted to make sure that the town, that this board was also included in the receipt of that report, so that we would play a constructive role. We would have the opportunity to look at whatever their findings and conclusions are, and then beyond that, to act further, to ask such questions and to take such further actions as we as a board, recognizing that our real authority is advisory only. We don't have the ability to judge or to order the town or direct the town or the police department or anyone else for that matter to do any specific thing, but to provide advice to it. But I certainly don't have any problem personally with doing exactly as you suggest. If that's acceptable to the manager and acceptable to the council to provide to this board first, speaking only for me, I don't have any problem in doing it in the manner in which you suggest. And Chris, as to the timeline, there is not a specific timeline. The only commitment that the manager has made to me is the commitment that he made to the members of the town council, which was to provide the report by the town within the next few weeks. So whatever the next few weeks is open to interpretation. What that means is open to interpretation, but that's the only timeline. So beyond that, we have no operating timeline. Neither we nor the council, and that I'm aware of, have an operating timeline about that. But I do not, speaking for me, oppose what you suggest.
Although I do think if we would do it, I would want to see the underlying documents as well, sort of like the merit brief and the depositions. You know, I'm sure, I have no idea, and I wonder if you know how they're actually conducting the investigation. Do they have an outside investigator? So I would be interested in that. It would be helpful to know who's actually doing the investigation, and also to make a request. I personally would like to see the underlying documents that are involved, so that, you know, I can verify, they say what, you know, that is what if we go in that direction, that would be something interesting.
Now, recognizing that there are some limitations in terms of documents that we can receive, I understand what you're saying. I actually don't know who all is participating. I do know that Ralph Carpenter, the town attorney, and the manager are involved in the gathering of information. They didn't explain to me their gathering process or who was involved, and they were under no obligation to do that, but it was just to express how we as a board, an advisory board, could become involved in this process. But I think your point is well taken. That if we're going to do our responsibility to the town and to the people who live in this community, we have a need to be able to have access to not only just to ask the questions, but also to look at the answers in terms of how they are out to need it.
As an advisory board, I'd like to request that we advise the town to complete this investigation as soon as possible.
Yes.
And for several reasons. I'd like to know when we're going to receive the report so that we'll have time to review it before the next meeting. I'd like to have the opportunity to ask, maybe it's the same thing as underlying documents, but to ask about the underlying procedure that was used to generate the report. And I think it's very important for us as an advisory group that represents the citizens of this community to advise the manager to please do this with all haste, because depending on what is decided as a result of this, there's been a request made of the council to have an independent review board. I don't know if they're going to do that or not, but if they do that, it's important to be able to talk to people about what happened while the memory's still fresh. And if this is going to be what stands as the report, then I'd like to have it as soon as possible so we can take a look at it.
Well, I would just say this, that if we do, as Donna has suggested, that we get involved in the front end, that is going to delay just of itself if they are going to then await some further clarification from us and to give us ample opportunity to review documents, to talk with people, to ask questions, and to do whatever other further inquiry we conduct. That is going to slow down the process before it ever gets to council in the first place. And so I just...
Well, and I don't have any control over what happens after that, but I think we can make that recommendation tonight to ask that this be completed in a timely fashion and that we have an understanding of when that report's going to be made available.
I think it's significant what Donna said about that the report will be a public document, but it may not be published by when we receive it. We do not know that, but in the public context of receiving and reviewing that and then beginning our discussion or deliberations or whatever we're going to do with it, I wanted to make sure that it still is appropriate for this committee to hear from those who might attend our meeting on any questions they would like us to consider, as well as the questions that arise from us within the report. And I want to know if that's appropriate with the committee, which I feel it is.
Well, I would say to you that is certainly among the things that we will discuss as a board to determine how we gather information, and assuming that we don't gather information from just one source or one direction, that we do gather information from a variety of directions to get a full look at whatever that picture is. Because it's a new process for us, it is something as a board that we are having to work our way through in terms of defining what that process looks like. And it could be a monumental process if you look in terms of just gathering the data and the information and the things that are part and parcel of all of this. It could be a monumental process.
And
the next meeting may only be the beginning.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about this because I don't see how we have either the resources or the expertise to do any fact-finding on our own, which is why I asked the question of who's the investigator? Is it an independent investigator or is it internal? And how do we, if we decide, or I guess maybe what you were saying is if we have a concern that perhaps it wasn't independent or certain sources weren't considered, that we raise that issue, but we don't have the resources. I mean,
Right.
we work, we have jobs, this is volunteer, we don't have money to fund experts, we don't have people that are skilled in cross-examination.
But you have helpers.
Weren't you suggesting that we were looking at it from
perhaps a different angle, that
Right.
we wouldn't be doing the investigation, but we might be asking more, other questions that might not have been
Perspective.
And
So
that
what-
I'm comfortable with, but when
Right.
you started talking about it being a monumental task, I took it to mean that we might be doing some fact finding, and that is the part that
So-
concerns me.
So what usually happens, what has happened in most of it, is that, someone from staff, and I would imagine it would be Chief Blue, would make a, report, would make a presentation to not only the folks here at this table, but to whoever came to listen. And then there would also be time for folks at the table to ask questions, and then you could open it up for questions. And at that point, it would either be, a point where the presenter could answer those questions, or those questions could be sent back to staff, and that would be a time when things like Ralph might say, that's a personnel issue, that question can't be answered, or whatever number of things happen. But what could possibly happen at the end of this conversation is that it be decided that this committee is not capable of doing the investigation. But what I want to do, because we work so hard to create this committee, is before we make that determination, we give this committee the chance to do the work. And if we can't do the work, then we send it out to other folks. But the reason we created this committee was for incidents just like this. We don't have them very often in Chapel Hill. But what we do have is a police department who we've asked to protect us and take care of us, and with that comes a certain ambiguity in the way, or ambivalence in the way that they do that. No one wants someone to carry a gun for them, but we haven't told the police officers to not carry guns. And so this committee was created to sort of swim through that ambivalence for our citizens and come up with some sort of middle ground and some sort of advocacy role and context. But if this committee can't take on it, then it's this committee's job to say, you know, we can't get enough information, that it needs to go someplace else. But what I want to do is to make sure that this committee has a chance to do the work it was created to do.
Well, what I would say to you in that regard is that part of the process here is defining exactly what our role is. We've looked at the narration of council's charge to this committee many times. This is the first opportunity we've really had to have a council member here to tell us what that charge means. So part of it is the expectations that council has of this board. If you expect this board to conduct a complete, thorough, investigative review of police procedures and processes, we're probably not equipped to do that.
It is staff's job.
Because we don't possess the professional expertise or the resources to actually do that job in a thorough way.
It's
If
the
you're
staff's job
asking-
to present you the information, and it's your job to ask the questions, to make sure that there aren't any holes in that information, that things haven't been overlooked, or if there is something of importance to the citizenry that hasn't been addressed, if there's a question or concern that hasn't been addressed, then it's your job to say, well, what about this? You know, so we've had questions about, setbacks. You know, so why do we have these level of setbacks, and how far, and why are they important? So it's your job is not to do the investigation. Your job is to get the information and say, is this information complete? Does it give us a complete picture? Do we need to ask more questions? Can this be done by staff? Do we feel like they can even give us the information that we need?
And then if we decide that the report's incomplete, we send it back to Chief Blue, and then he tries to find the information. We've got the authority to send
He's
it
not
back.
doing the
Do I hear then,
It's the organization.
given the conversation we've had, do I hear a motion that we make a request to the town manager, and you correct me if I'm misstating what
Okay.
you are proposing
I
to this
will.
board, because you're our council liaison, so
I
you're
will.
gonna give your recommendation to this board considerable consideration. Do I hear a motion that we make a recommendation to the manager that the report that will be concluded by the manager and the town attorney be delivered to this board prior to its delivery to the town council? And that this board would have the opportunity to ask questions, to fill holes, that may appear obvious to it, and to do such other inquiry as its limited resources allow it to do, in advance of it being surrendered to the town council. And under any circumstance, that it be done as quickly as possible, that that
Exactly.
report be concluded as quickly as possible.
And-
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Hold on, can we have some discussion?
Yes.
Yeah.
This will be a public meeting, so it, in essence, will be released to the public at that point before it goes to council, correct?
That's correct.
So is that what council wants?
That, what council wants is for this board to get the information from the citizens, ask any questions for any holes that are missing. So what might happen, instead of the report actually going back and then coming back to you, your questions that were raised at your meeting, would come along with the report. So usually what happens is the report is either amended, to reflect any changes that have been made in regards to the questions that were raised by the committee. And if those questions haven't been addressed or can't be addressed, then there's a note as to why. So basically, it is a way for the sort of look, so yes, it would be a public, it would be publicly
Just a public
seen
forum.
before
council.
council.
So that means, when you say publicly seen, that means, I'm wondering about the people that are going to wanna make comments, are they gonna see it so that they can actually be informed about what's in there?
If it's a public meeting, then it has to be publicly.
Okay, but that means the document will be made available before the meeting?
So usually documents are made available at least 24 hours before a meeting. So they won't get them as quickly as you will get them as committee members,
Mhm.
probably,
Okay.
but they will get them before the meeting.
Other questions from members of the board?
So at that meeting, will we have public feedback? I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna wanna hear that. Maybe that's a detail that we can address at the time, but.
We're gonna have a lot of questions. I'm
We're gonna
sure.
have a lot of questions.
That's gonna be a
And
big-
that will certainly be one of the questions that will need to be entertained, as to how that process will look. And in addition to receiving the report, how do we then shape the information that both raises the questions that we should be asking, that has now been expressed to us, they expect us to do, to ask those questions, and how will we go about getting that information? Because it's gonna, my guess is, it's going to have to come from much more than just some public comments from people who've got opinions about it one way or the other, that it's actually gonna require much more detailed examination. So, any other discussion from members of the board? There's a motion before the board, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
If it's appropriate, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the tabling of the review of the Yates Building incident pending a reply of the manager.
Very good. Anything further from members of the board? All right, we will tender that request to the town manager, requesting that the report be provided to the board prior to its delivery to council, to give us the opportunity to look that up.
I'm gonna interrupt one more time. There seems to be some public questions that I'd love to have on the record about this
I don't even
conversation.
have a comment on the question. Is it okay? Could we, I would hope it would be possible for the next, having been on a commission, I understand meeting in a room this size, because that's the way we met. But considering the fact that there may be some, more people who would like to show up, could we have a request that the room be able to accommodate more people, you know, if they appear? So I just
Thank you.
hope that
We'll
will be
take that matter under
considered.
advisement. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't it be a good use of our time here, while we're all here, and to collect a series of questions that we send to the manager that we would like him to ask in terms of his investigation? Because that would save a whole step in this process, rather than wait to see what he provides.
Well,
I'm sure there are
rather than waste
questions on our
time doing
minds.
that, because I don't want to assume that he isn't asking the questions that you might have, and we won't know that until we actually receive the report.
But there's no harm.
I have to rely upon the manager's assertion that they will have the report to us in a week or so.
But there's
So-
no harm to let him know what we're looking for.
Yes, sir, I understand.
If you email, anybody in this room can email, Roger Stansel. If you email him, it becomes, believe me, he emails us and tells us what the questions are. They become part of the record. So if you have questions that you feel like are important to be included in the process, then I suggest you email him, and make those questions known. That it doesn't have to come through this committee, and that way it's part of the process that's ongoing right now.
Donna, then I have a question about that, because I think it's important that it doesn't go just to Roger, but it goes to this committee.
That's fine.
So do you mind if the public sends them to you and you distribute them out?
That's
or-
fine.
and it's
So
a matter of record?
I am D-Bell, D-B-E-L-L, the number 4ch@gmail.com.
But, just to finish, I suggest you put them on the website so that people will not ask duplicate questions. We'll see that their question has been raised, and if you don't mind, I think that would make it a much more efficient process.
I would suggest that instead of sending them to you, that you send them to the chair of this board.
Okay.
And he'd be directed to send those on to Roger Stansel, rather than you becoming the chair of this committee, which is not the intent.
Thank you.
So,
How would we do that?
what's that email?
So if you go online, I think.
Are our email addresses and other information posted on the town website? Yeah, I believe it's probably already on there.
Do you mind giving it out?
It is RoboJudge, it's one word, RoboJudge@earthlink.net, if you want to send it directly to me.
I think it's important that you post those questions on the website so people won't ask duplicate questions.
You sure you don't wanna create a Gmail account for this right now?
I think the advisory committee actually has an email address to that, which might be the best way to go about it.
I thought there was, we come
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I
I'm
believe
not
there
sure
is.
we have the ability to manipulate, post everything on the website.
I'm not sure. We do have that ability, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, are you looking down on the town website for us? I think there's an email that goes, just like there is to you, to mayor and council.
But do we have any ability to post, can we?
On the
No.
website, I am.
The, town IT department handles that. I mean, it's not a bad idea, but I'm hesitant to make that commitment on behalf of somebody else. But we could, make sure that we, include them in the agenda packet that we send out at the next meeting, when we're gonna review that report.
Question back there.
Hi, I just want to ask, if an email comes to a member of the council, that becomes part of the public record anyway, doesn't it? Or to go directly to Roger Stansel?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, what I was
don't
gonna
speak for the
say is if
council,
you want
but
transparency, say,
Yes,
it's
sir.
probably better that all the emails go to a town email address, so that it's part of the public record as opposed to.
Any email that comes to us is part of public.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure we actually get all the emails. So if we do have an email address before, that'd be great to use.
It's a town staff member's email address, so if you're comfortable using that, it will, any email sent to her, will then get directed to the committee if you'd like to go that way.
That would be correct.
You also. Would it make sense to come to you and then also for Roger Stansel to be CC? Is that, or do you want him to come to you and then you send?
I'm just agreeing with what the chief just raised here about emails going to staff member, staff address, and then the staff address, the staff member will then direct us. Rather than putting that administrative burden on us to do that.
Can the staff member also categorize them too? Is that a service that the staff member to the committee provides?
Well, this is actually, this particular address would go straight to our clerk's office. They wouldn't do the staff, they could, categorize.
Can we just clarify what email address we want to get people to use to send their questions? Thank you.
So let's use, J Phillips, JPHILLIPS @townofchapelhill.org. And if you didn't get that, you can go to the Community Policing Advisory Committee page on the town site and link to that.
And Will, in response to your question, I'm sending an email to the communications people to see how we would be able to post questions.
I appreciate it. I'm sure you're gonna get the same general question over and over and over.
Did the motion about, getting the report, when you said, I didn't write it down, so did it include a recommendation that they be provided the underlying documents from the
It
investigation?
did not include the recommendation that we provided underlying. I mean, the motion did not include the
Okay.
recommendation.
So I need to make a motion to amend, to
The motion
include the
underlying
recommendation,
documents
include
from-
the underlying documents from the town's investigation.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion about motion to amend?
Yes, does all of that become, is all of that in the public record?
It would be, but.
It would be?
Yes, it would.
It is now.
And I have no idea, because I don't know the scope and the extent of their investigation, whether that pile of documents may look like this, or that pile of documents may look like that. I have no idea.
So, second?
I'm sort of wondering what those would be.
They could be notes if there was an investigator doing an interview. They could be notes. They could, if they recorded interviews, it could be a recording of an interview. I mean, it could be photographs. There could be a whole host of things that sometimes it's helpful to look at the original documents because people have different, reasonable minds can disagree on how something should be interpreted. That's. The equivalent is like in a court case where there's depositions where it's with the interview with a witness and then somebody files, the brief that sort of summarizes that. Well, you typically go back and you're like, okay, well, did they really say that? And what was the context of the statement? And it sort of helps you just put it in place. And I think it would give a richer understanding, but.
So, Donna, would there be any reason why you can think of that the town manager wouldn't want that?
What I will say to you as a committee is that I would ask for information when you need information, that digging through on a first look, piles of original documentation, especially since what I just said is that it's not your job to do the investigation. It's your job to ask the questions, that you see what questions you want to ask, to make sure that you're, I'm not sure what you would be looking for.
Just having investigated a lot of cases as a lawyer, it's something I'm familiar and really comfortable with, and it gives me a comfort level that when I'm reading someone's conclusions, that there's a basis for them in the record.
I think one of the things I'm saying is that if there's a space where you're like, how did you come up with this? That you ask, I'm sure that whoever is presenting will be able to either say, we can't present that information to you because, it's not available or it's not open to the public, or they'll say, this is what, and they will point you because all of this information, what is public, they will point you to the public document. So I guess that's what I'm saying is that you'll get the information before anyone else does. And so you'll have the ability to be like, well, I think I want more information about this. And they can point you towards where that document exists and you can read it. But what I don't want you to do is what you guys are saying you didn't want to do, which is take on the task of investigating this process. It's your job to read the report and make sure the report is complete.
Yeah, my position is just that I feel like I'm not gonna be able to make that determination if I can't look at the underlying documents. But that's, you know, everybody will have their own opinion on that.
Second.
I'm a lawyer, that's,
And part of the challenge is, that for this board, we have no way of knowing what that report
Yeah.
actually will contain, whether it will contain a series of factual findings and representations upon which we might or might not agree, or it will contain a series of conclusions that are supported by no findings, about which raise lots of questions. And perhaps in some sense, we're not gonna know that until we actually receive the report, whether it's conclusion-based or whether it's factual-based. So that creates part of the problem, is just the uncertainty of what that report is gonna look like.
Can we short circuit that, Jim?
Well, I think that since the council is asking for the informed feedback from this group, we need to help them be as